Hello and welcome back. I hope you're all having a great day. I'm having a great day. Thanks for joining for another episode of Tableau Tip Tuesday, the series where we take a closer look at some of Tableau's functionality. From beginner to expert, this is a great series for you to find some hidden gems to take your visualizations to a new level. Today we're going to be going over Tableau's order of operations with regards to filters for the most part, although we will throw a quick fixed LOD expression in there as well. So essentially Tableau operates these certain filters in a set order of operations. So we need to know that order of operations so that we can leverage that to our advantage. So I have a graphic that we're starting with here. It is Tableau's order of operations. There's plenty of documentation on this if you wanted to do some further reading. But for now, let's just go ahead and break down our different filter types contained within this graphic. Now, I will let you know that include and exclude LODs, we see those on the screen there. That will be its own separate video. Those can be a little bit tricky, as well as set filters. So we'll go over everything else on this view right here, except for set filters and include and exclude expressions. All right, so let's go ahead and get to work. Our first two, our extract filters and our data source filters, we actually do those back in our modeling tab over here on data source. So if I click on this and we look in the upper right hand section of the screen, we have those two filter options. Now these two filter options are unique in that they actually control the amount of data that sits behind Tableau. So if you package this up in a packaged workbook, the file size will actually be a little bit smaller. Now that's different if I go to a sheet over here. If I just drag a dimension over here to filters, yes, it will remove that information from my view, but that information still sits behind Tableau. It's just filtered out of the view. So if we go back to our data source tab and we go over here to extract, the difference between these two is just the way that the data will be saved. So an extract is going to make a localized copy of your data. So as soon as I press edit to edit my extract, this again will be its own video if you want to know how to make efficient extracts here. But right here we can just add different dimensional and measure filters, and this will remove the row level data from behind Tableau, actively decreasing the size of the file. So it can be very useful to filter out in this fashion anything that you didn't use at all in that particular workbook, because that's just kind of erroneous data that's sitting there and doesn't need to be in there. It's going to slow down upload times, download times, interaction times. It's just better if that information is not there. Now, slightly different than that is our data source filter. So let me go ahead and resume my live connection here. And if I add a data source filter right here, it's up to me how I save this. So an extract makes a localized copy of that data, whereas this is just going to filter whatever live connection that I currently have. So the information that's being sent from your server to Tableau is reduced, but it's not going to be a localized copy of your data. Now all of these, they function just like normal everyday dimensional and measure filters. Hopefully we're familiar with those at least, but I do have another video outlining all of those as well. But you can see that once we add the filter, it is just a standard measure and dimensional filter right there. All right, so let's go over to sheet one. Our first top on our order of operations after extract and data source filters, which are again are unique because they limit the amount of data sitting behind Tableau. We have context filters. Now, I think of context filter as a lens that you can put your visualization through. So let's go ahead and take a look here. I'm going to go to sheet one, and what we want to do right here is we want to see our top 10 performing items per category here. So we'll bring our product names over to the right of our category. We can stick a metric in there just so we have something to look at here, throw a sort on it, and what we want to see is our top 10 product names. So we know from our dimensional filter that if I take product names and drop it onto filter here, I can go over to my top 10 where I can view my top 10 products based on the sum of sales. Now this is not going to have the results that we would like. When I press OK, you can see that we have our top 10 products, but it's not our top 10 products per category. It is our top 10 products and whatever category they happen to reside in. You can even see that our office supplies category isn't even represented because none of the products in there happen to be in that category. None of our top 10 products. So what we need to do is we need to set our lens so that we can have our top 10 within our contextual lens. So our contextual lens we want to be category. So we'll take our category filter right here. and we'll drop it onto our filters. Now, I'm not too interested in setting this at all. I just want to add this as a contextual filter, so it is the lens that my second filter goes through. So we can go ahead and press OK. And the way we accomplish this is by right-clicking that filter, and we can go to an option called Add to Context. Now, this is always going to turn that filter gray, just so you have a visual representation of what that is in the order of operations. But now when we show that filter, check it out. If I deselect everything and we just set a lens of office supplies, there's my top 10 products within office supplies only. And if we go to furniture, there's my top 10 within furniture as well. We could even multi-select this contextual lens and say, I want to know my top 10 across furniture and office supplies. And there you can see that is represented right. So now if I toggle back to this image, we can see that this visualization is giving me my contextual lens of whatever I select. And then I get my dimensional or measure filter of top 10. So my context is evaluated first, and then my dimension and measure filters come in after that. All right, let's take a look at another example here. We're going to go ahead and make a quick map here. So let's go ahead and double-click state. We'll filter that to the US just to make it a little bit more concise of a view right here. And what our goal here is I'm going to go ahead and put sales into my label right here. So we get a label of each state's sales. And we're going to go ahead and turn that into a % of total. There we go. Now, if you'll notice here, this is not the percentage that Illinois or Nebraska contributes to the U.S. It is the percentage that South Dakota, Nebraska, or Illinois contributes to the entire world. So if we go ahead and take our country and place it onto filters here, and we filter to just the United States, well, now we can see those percent values readjust themselves to be within the confines of my dimensional filter. So that's one very important thing to note. Well, if we want to know Illinois' contribution to the world, we need to remove that filter. So we would essentially need two separate views. So if I back up a step, we can actually use our order of operations to our advantage. And the way that we can do that is by using this fixed LOD expression right here. All right, so let's take a look at the calculation that we can use to kind of cheat it into Tableau's order of operations before we get our dimensional filter right here, which again is reducing that denominator. If we have $1 million of sales in the US, this dimensional filter is removing the remaining sales that we have for the rest of the world. So we just need to add that back. So let's go into our calculated field editor and we'll start our fixed LOD expression. So we're going to do an open curly brace, and essentially what we want to do is we want to say fix this calculation to everything. And the way we can accomplish that is just by removing the left-hand side of our LOD calculation. So rather than saying fixed dimension and then separating it by a colon with your aggregation, we're just going to say sum of sales inside of these curly braces, and that's going to say fix my sales to my overall aggregation for the entire data set rather than to the level of detail of the view. So this is our denominator. Now all we need to do is take the sum of our sales, and again this sum of sales will aggregate to the level of detail of my view. Now we're still going to have an error here, and that's because within that LOD expression it looks like there's an aggregation, but Tableau evaluates it as a separate expression. So we do need to aggregate it outside of the LOD as well. And in order to do that, I'm just going to be applying a minimum right here. Now, if this is confusing at all to you, I would recommend my LOD expression video that I made a little while ago. It explains exactly what we're doing with these types of things right here. So I'll go ahead and I'll call this % total world. We can go ahead and press OK. I'll even take the time to right click and format that to be a % because that's what it is. Percentage, we'll go 1 decimal here, and now we can drag this into our view, and voila, we have Nebraska's contribution to America on top and Nebraska's contribution to the world on the bottom. Now we'll notice that the one on the bottom is not going to readjust itself with my dimensional filter, whereas the top one will. All right, our next example is looking at filtering with table calculations here. So in order to do this, I need to just do a quick year-over-year growth. So we'll put our sales information in there, we'll put our order date in there, and our goal here is to see the year-over-year growth of sales. So we'll apply that quick table calculation here. I'll go ahead and put my regular instance of sales in there as well so we know what value we're comparing it to. And you can see that right here, my first year in business is not going to have a year-over-year growth because there is no prior year. So if I wanted to filter this to be the most recent year or something of that nature, you would think that you could take your order date and put it onto filters and just filter out the years that you do not want. So we'll filter out our years, we'll filter out 2012 and press OK. But the problem that we have here is that now my view doesn't see that year of information. So now 2013 is my blank year because I've removed 2012 from the entire equation. So what we need to do is use a table calculation filter, because again, if I go back to my visualization, you can see my table calc filters are going to happen after any dimensional and measure filters that we have within our view. So we're going to use a table calculation to look up the previous quarter so that we can remove it, rather than removing all the information that this sheet sees at all. Now, in order to see the table calculation that will allow us to do this, we're going to need to structure our data a little bit differently. So basically this date format is not going to work for a lookup function. We need to parse out those dates or truncate those dates so we can just isolate the one object that we would like. So in this case, it would be years. So I have an example workbook over here that's already pre-built here so we can take a look at this calculation. And as you can see here, my date fields are formatted as strings, so they're not going to be functioning like a true date. So rather than turn this video quite longer with that structure, I just have a pre-built example right here where we could take a look at this calculation and see that it is just looking up the previous quarter that's in there, and we can filter based on what it's looking up rather than removing the information entirely here. So if we take a look at this chart right here, we have two filters shown over here in the right, and looking at the title, we can see that the first one is my table calculation filter, and the second one is just my standard quarter filter. So we know that as I remove my quarters, it is now going to see quarter 2 as being my new first quarter in business, because this is removing the underlying data from the sheet, whereas our lookup calculation here is only looking up the value that it looked up previously. So you can see that I'm not getting those nulls for my difference from stat right here. All right, hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer how we can use Tableau's order of operations to our advantage. It's not anything you have to be too scared or nervous about. We just need to have a good working knowledge of when all these things process so we can ensure we use them correctly. All right, that's it for today. Join us next week for another tip.